Welcome everybody to Patchcast. In this video, we're going to be ranking all the mid lane champions from patch 2607, high elo and low elo tier lists. Joining me today, we got AJ, multi-season challenger in NA, and I'm representing Europe. We're going to be starting with the changes from this patch. There's not been that many. It's a pretty small patch, only Cassiopeia and Veigar. So let's just get these straight out the window. Then we are going to discuss some of the first stand reflections, and we got some viewer questions afterwards as well. For the next patch, guys, if you have a specific question that you have about a specific champion, drop it in the comments or join the Discord. You can also put it in the Discord, and we will then get back to your questions. Now, first and foremost, Cassiopeia. They're making a few changes towards her early game base mana and towards her E bonus magic damage. Now, Cassiopeia was a C tier inhabitant. She's a counter pick oriented champion, but she gets some nice buffs towards her early game mana, which is really big in a lot of matchups. And of course, her E all-in threat now being higher, her having more damage on her E. Does this do anything to her tiering? What do you think when you see these buffs, AJ?
Yeah, so before we talk about the actual tier itself, let's just talk about what does this mean for Cassiopeia lanes, right? So the biggest thing about Cassiopeia is that she's a champ that kind of wants to snowball through the early game, right? She's a champion that has extremely strong all-in power. You can kind of run past the wave in higher range matchups and just threaten them, right? So any change that buffs her early game power is really, really good because she's a snowball-oriented champ, right? Assuming you're not playing her in a counter pick scenario, right? So getting 30 mana is basically an extra E, right? And the E base damage went up. So in an all-in, let's say you all-in at level 3, right? You have 1 point Q, 2 points E. Your all-in is doing what? An extra like 70, 80 damage? Because you get one more E, plus every E is doing an extra 2.
You get an extra right? E. I was like, whoa, you're doing some interesting maths here. Yeah, but that extra E is the one that matters, right?
Yeah,
Correct.
You get an extra E, and then like each E, that you may do 10 E's, that's like an extra 10 damage. So that's going to change a lot of these matchups, right? Especially if it's a matchup that's higher range and you need to use your all-in threat to pressure them. Does this change her from C tier? I'm not sure. These are welcome buffs for Cassio. I'm not really a Cassio expert, to be honest. I haven't seen her in a while, but I do think this moves the needle enough where I could see her being a little more solid, a little bit more pickable, right? That's my initial thoughts.
I think so too, because I think the key thing you got to keep in mind about Cassiopeia is that in the early game, you don't really play on her HP as a resource all that heavily. You play more on her mana as a resource because it's so limited. And she has one all-in potential. If she messes it up, that's when she doesn't really have any foot to stand on. She doesn't have any foots anyway. But she's a snake, of course. But in general, it's pretty hard for her to lane with their previous mana costs. And they've been buffing this. I think they already buffed this before. So Cassio's lane is quite oppressive. It's not always fun to verse, especially if you're in a pretty rough matchup. So I do actually think that this moves the needle because this also makes her tougher matchups a little bit easier to play because one Q can now lead to a better all-in. And you just got to be a little bit more careful with getting hit with these Qs because Cassio generally already spams a lot of Qs in lane because she can fish for a Q. If she lands, she goes forward. If she doesn't land, she can wait for her next one and play defensive. And it's pretty long range. So yeah, I think Cassio is definitely B tier minimum right now.
And just looking at her win rate, obviously she's a counter pick champ, so the pick rate is low. But Master Plus, her win rate's 51%. So in the good games, which most people are probably playing her in the good games, her win rate's already pretty good. So I think she's gonna be actually quite solid. Yeah. So I like B tier. I think it makes a lot of sense.
B tier it is. Now Veigar has been on the receiving end of some nerfs, and we already talked about it in the previous Patchcast episode that we did, in the sense that we thought that Veigar was a little bit stronger than we initially rated him, due to the fact that all of the other mid laners got nerfed, and that basically buffs up all the other mid lane champions. And Riot decided to nerf him. I think it's probably because of bot lane Veigar. I don't think mid lane Veigar was by any means too strong. So it's probably bot lane Veigar that they're hitting, especially because they're hitting the R cooldown here, which you have a more problem with on bot than on mid because the level is a little bit lower on bot lane. Now, what does this do to Veigar? I don't think it does too much. It hurts him a little bit. He might miss out on one R in a skirmish or something like that, or he might be a little bit less incentivized to use it in lane or for lane control. But I think overall the champion Veigar still does Veigar things. So I would say it wouldn't really change him too much on mid lane. What do you think?
My initial reaction is how much haste does a Veigar build early game? Are we going Roa Veigar? Are you going Archangel's Veigar? Are you going like what are you going? Because the thing is, 120-second CD when you have no haste or like very little haste, that's a long time. Because the thing is with Veigar is that a lot of his skirmishing power is in the ults, right?
Yeah.
Because you skirmish, so you're like, let's say you're doing a mid jungle 2v2, right? Your
Yeah.
jungler's probably getting them to 50%, so your R is already at almost full power. So missing out on one window without your R when your champ already isn't that great early game,
Yeah.
that's a little awkward. And then going into the mid game, you don't have a lot of haste. That can be a little awkward. Now you aren't spamming your R on cooldown, right? Like a Twisted Fate. So I don't think this moves the needle. But like a Veigar player has to be definitely a little bit more aware of taking a skirmish when he doesn't have R. So yeah, I
Yeah.
think he's still going to be quite good, especially
Mhm.
because again, all the other mid laners got nerfed in the previous patches. Just not as you have to be a little bit more careful with the R. That's pretty much it.
Yeah, so a little bit more input on Veigar's itemization. Veigar loves building haste. He doesn't always do it.
Right.
But in the runes, he usually goes the likes of haste. He loves going
Yeah.
flat haste already instead of attack speed to get more Q stacks. He often runs Transcendence with Legend haste, so he gets a lot of free haste in his runes. And
Yep.
a lot of Veigar players also are building Protobelt first item, which is of course really good,
Makes
really
sense.
cheap.
That sounds really good. Yeah.
So he's getting quite a bit of haste, but there's also
Right.
games where he's forced away from Ionians into Mercs and into Roa. And if you play into Zinra, something like that, this is going to hurt more than if you are able to go that Protobelt build with Ionians.
Yeah, and again, looking at his win rate, it's quite good. Master plus 50%. 50%. That's pretty damn solid. So
Right.
looking good.
All right. So let's reflect a little bit on first then, right? Because I think that we made some predictions last time that it was Ryze, Azir, and Orianna to be the most played champs. We were wrong because Ryze and Orianna were permabanned.
Yeah. Hey, that counts, man. I'm counting that.
Exactly.
I'm counting that.
Yeah, so Ryze and Orianna were completely out. No questions asked.
Which
like
makes
just
total sense.
Top of the tier mid laners at the moment. I think for solo queue, still Orianna is slightly lower. But for pro play, of course, she is a little bit better. But the champion that we were a little bit wrong of is Azir. We thought Azir would be still most played in the pro leagues. That wasn't actually the case. Azir Prio dropped so massively they did hit him finally hard enough with nerfs.
Yeah, it was too strong. Yeah.
Yep. But do keep in mind that Azir's gotten buffed up since then, so he still stays B tier. We're not making any changes to this. Yeah, so this was actually pretty exciting internationals. I actually think that MSI, because of this, is going to be even more exciting because finally we managed to beat Korea as all of the other regions. So
you
have
all regions, man. Oh my god, that stings extra bad as an NA. So
yeah. We 3-0'd them twice, by the way. Let's not even look at that point.
Yeah, crazy.
Yeah, so NA is clearly the region that needs to step up the next time, all right? We're going to root for NA, even as EU West inhabitant here.
Yeah, sure.
Great. Let's cover some viewer questions here. First one, right? We're going to look at Tryndamere mid, and not necessarily Tryndamere mid in general, but also just the state of AD mids. And I kind of want to start with the state of AD mids. AD mids, if you also look at first end, they've just not been played. I don't think I've seen a young game. Maybe there's a young game there. I can't really remember it. But AD mids are generally not in the meta right now. Now, one of the reasons is the fact that AP junglers are not really in the meta. That's one of the reasons. And because generally AP mids are a little bit stronger. But do you think there's any other reasons why AD mids are just not that good right now?
Yeah, because when I think about AD mids, a lot of them are hard to execute. Right, so that's always something that's been a problem for AD mids. Like you literally just look at every single AD mid in the S plus and S tier. Akshan, Yasuo, Zed, Kiana. These champs are all ridiculously hard to play, right? And obviously in pro play they're very niche, right? Like none of these are playable at all in pro play, right? The only ones is really like Yone and like a Jace, which are all hard. So it's just like the burden of execution is extremely high. So it takes a lot of investment to learn them. Right. The second thing is, like you said, is the pairing with junglers. Usually you want to pair AD mid with AP jungle. So if Lilia is good, if Maokai is good, if Sejuani is good, but these champs are not meta right now, right? These pure tank junglers are just not good. You want like a jungler with some pressure and some threat, right? The Xin Zhaos and the Jarvans and stuff. So that kind of combination means that for solo queue, a lot of these champs are too hard. For pro play, not enough AP junglers to enable these AD mids, right?
Yeah.
And I think the set or the season where AD mids were really, really good was the ADC meta,
Yeah.
right? And that was because ADC mids had a lot of tools to keep themselves alive in lane. So the other thing was the sustainers, right? They nerfed Fleet, they nerfed Absorb Life, right? Tempo resetting is a lot more difficult on an AD mid compared to AP mid because AP mid is going to keep you stuck on a turret and they're going to tempo reset first.
Wave
So I
tier.
think that kind of combination just makes it really, really difficult to play any of the archetypes of AD mids right now.
Yeah. There's even one more reason that's often overlooked. It's actually the steel caps at the moment. Steel caps are just OP. They're the best boots if you find a good angle for them. And most top laners, right, what we saw is that there's a little bit of flexibility on top, but a lot of top laners were actually AD. So if you're going to combine that with an AD mid, then the value of a mid laner buying steel caps in the side lane is too high, and there's a lot more flexibility in side lane play. So yeah, I think that there should be, especially with how OP that these mid lane boots are. If you want to draft optimally, you want to have a split between AP and AD on top of mid if possible. Otherwise, the value of those boots are too high because they are strong, these upgraded boots, right? And the side lane becomes too easy in that sense. So I think that's why AD mids are not that good. And Tryndamere is just, let's just go back to Tryndamere. Tryndamere is just dog shit, right? In the sense that he has a very niche play style. His mid game is really, really unique and inconsistent, I would say. You just fully split push. Well, first things first, if you lose 1v1, you have no identity. You're fucked. So you're forced to win lane. The way you win lane is really niche. You don't really interact. You perma sustain. You sometimes hit turret. It's a very boring, I would say, play style. Steel caps, of course, heavy counter. Not that many AP junglers. What else about this champ? This champ is not it, huh?
Yeah, so I was just looking at the win rate for Tryndamere mid. I mean, it's okay. Here's the strengths of Tryndamere mid, right? Is I think his laning is actually quite strong, but in a niche way, right?
Impressive.
So what I mean by that is like your trading as the player is competent against the range is not that good, but you literally can never leave. You can never get pushed out of lane, and you can sit there and literally tank and get demolished procs on the turret, right? So if you can snowball and accelerate yourself on Tryndamere, you're gonna do Tryndamere things. But the second you fall behind, you are fucked. Not to mention, I think Tryndamere mid in specific is a little weird because it's very hard to match the top laner because the top laner is up like a level over you, usually a level and a half, and your boots upgrade is not going to rival a top laner being a level and a half above you with a TP advantage. Right?
Good luck for his Jax.
So that's what makes things a little awkward. I don't think he's bad, especially if you like do really well in the first 10 minutes with his laning phase, right? So I think like if you do that, he's okay, but that's it. Right, it's like you got to have a good first 10 minutes so you can now play your mid game. Otherwise, good luck. If you go even, you're completely useless.
Yep,
completely useless.
The truth is, that's why we also just don't put him in the mid lane tier list. He's not a mid laner, guys.
Yeah, exactly.
He's not a mid laner. Great, Aurora. Now we had a question: why the hell is Aurora S+? Tim, I don't understand it. AJ, I don't understand what makes this champion S+. Should we just boot up your OPGG, AJ?
Yeah, put up the OPGG. Let's do some glazing here. Yeah.
All right, so what we see in this OPG, which is currently in German, so let's move that away. We see that Mr. AJ over here has done quite well on the Aurora.
That's not too
What's
bad.
your secret here?
All right, okay, so let's talk about Aurora. Okay, so Aurora... Usually champs like Aurora have pretty intuitive ways to play. So if you think about Ahri, like Ahri is the most similar comparison. Ahri is very intuitive to play, right? You come from Fog of War, you can go front to back with your charm if you have to, you can flank, right? Your abilities make sense intuitively. You use your charm into your Q, into your auto, into your W. Aurora, what makes her so interesting is that her kit is very unintuitive, right? Like for example, in lane, sometimes you don't even press your W or E for the entire lane, right? And so that's what kind of makes her, I guess, so interesting. And there's a lot of hidden power in her because if you never press your W or E, you're basically in lane the whole time, spamming your Q. You don't have any mana problems at all, right? You put a ton of pressure in lane. You don't need to buy mana item. That's the other thing I was kind of segueing here, is that a lot of Aurora's power comes from not needing to buy a mana item, right? So if you look at my build, like look at that game where one of these games, right? I don't build a single mana item, and what I build is as many damage amplification items as possible, right? Sork Boots, damage amp, right? Shadow Flame, damage amp. Horizon, damage amp. Void Staff, damage amp. Rabadon's damage amp. Liandry's damage amp, right? every single damage item possible you can build. And so what happens, you start multiplying and multiplying and multiplying, because you don't need haste on this champ, right? You just you don't really need HP that much. You just need as much AP and pen as possible, right? And
Yep.
so what happens is that you get your strong first 12 minutes, right? And then you just completely snowball the game, right? That's how I kind of view Aurora. That's what makes her so strong. You have a good first 12 minutes, and you build full damage items, and then boom, you explode. You kind of just explode the game.
Literally.
Do like 10,000 damage in one team fight, pretty much.
Yeah, you can just QE and they die, the AD carries, by the way. You don't even need ult. You just W forward, info, QE, bam, gone.
Yes.
Now, there's a reason why he asked this question, right? And I totally understand where he's coming from. Because Aurora, at face value, can be quite tricky. Like you already mentioned, the build is something that's quite non-intuitive for a lot of people. A lot of people still building Ludens. It's not optimal at the moment, guys. Liandry's Pro the Belt or Storm Surge are your best options. Now, another massively overlooked thing is that Aurora is just fucking hard, man.
Yes.
Holy shit, this champion is hard. And there's two reasons why this champ is hard. It's the fact that her skill shots insanely hard to land. If you miss your combo, you don't do anything. Like you said, you don't build haste on the correct build, right? Not that much, at least. You don't get it in your runes. So if you miss your spells, you are you're a walking dead man. Dead man walking. That's how it is. You're just dead. You're useless. Yeah. Another problem, right? And this is very skewed to high elo, right? The better you are at the champ, the easier it is for you to land your spells. But of course, the players also get better at dodging spells. So it's like this infinite skill ceiling. Yep. But we haven't even talked about the mid game, because the mid game is also something that can just completely overwhelm you. This champ can do anything. I'm not sure if you've seen anyone play Caps play Aurora in first hand. He wasn't even catching sideways. He was just hovering with perma on the invis with the fork, looking to one-shot people. And it works. But sometimes it doesn't work. And you got to figure out why it works. And you don't know if you got to be side or not. So it's so easy to just throw the game one bad play. And I'm going to just compliment you a little bit, right? One thing that's AJ's strength especially, AJ is really good in the mid game. That's his biggest strength. Very disciplined player. Knows exactly where he needs to be on the map. And because of that quality of his as a player, he can make this champion work incredibly well. So Aurora is S+ tier in the right hands. If you are like Platinum, Emerald, Aurora is not S+ tier, right? That's also why in the lower elo tier list, we put Aurora in C tier because she scales with ranks. Anything you want to add?
No, I mean, the only thing I would say is if you're looking to learn Aurora, what you need to do is learn how to use your W and your R to guarantee your QE. Because that's the point of your W and R, right? The slow from your W allows you to land your QE. The invis from your W allows you to land your QE. So that's the first thing you need to think about. And then the second thing is mana management in lane. Pretend like you only have one ability each trade in lane, right? That's a rule of thumb. It's like either you go double auto into E, or you don't press W or E and you go Q auto Q2, right? So those would be my suggestions if you're trying to learn how to level up your Aurora. Otherwise,
land your spells. It's that simple. Just land your spells. All right. So next up, why is Xerath next to Ziggs in C tier? This is absolutely ridiculous, right?
Yeah, he should be lower.
Why is he not A tier? Why is he not A? He should be A tier. What is he doing next to Ziggs in C tier? I'll take this one, okay? Because the next one is one you're gonna love. I'll take this one. Xerath is in C tier because of the fact that he is very similar as to Ziggs. Okay, both Xerath and Ziggs do a very similar thing. They're artillery mages, and what these champions do is they're kind of locked in certain places in the game. They're not that good at rotating. They're not that good at leveraging the side lane. And if you play Xerath or Ziggs game where you just ARAM and you poke, of course these champs are going to be absolute top of A tier, S tier even. But the problem is that we're playing on Summer's Rift and not on Howling Abyss, okay? And in the Summer's Rift, we have the jungle and we have two side lanes. And that is where these champions struggle, especially Xerath. His wave clear is quite tricky in the side lane. If you don't get ahead on this champion, which is not something that you will do because he's got quite long cooldowns in the early lane, a lot of players know how to play offense, defense, push you in. You're just going to kind of get pinpointed in the lane. If you can't really get that push, you're going to get slowly bleed out. You won't be able to move first. You're going to struggle a little bit in the side lane. The agency is just barely not there. There's certain matchups where Xerath and Ziggs will take over, right? Put yourself in an Azir. You have a really good matchup because you can contest the lane a little bit better. You put yourself into the likes of a Vex or a Lux, if you get some good matchups or you get ahead, right, these champs can become insanely oppressive because they can dictate the game to be played around their styles. And that's why we put them in the C tier for counterpick. But good luck playing these champions if you're playing into Ryze or if you're playing into Ahri. Right? Yes, you're gonna poke the Ryze a little bit with your spells, but guess what he's gonna do? He's gonna push you in, he's gonna reset, he's gonna be full HP, back with boots, and he's gonna dodge your spells. Right?
Yeah.
Anything you want to add to these?
Yeah, so I think the only thing I would add is basically just a very practical situation, okay? So let's say you go into mid game, right? Your ADC takes over mid, and it's 15 minutes in, right? So, and you're against a Ryze. So what are your options? Either you go side, and then you run the side, Ryze pushes you in, now you're stuck under your turret, and because you're a no mobility champ who basically cannot play by himself, you are now stuck under your turret, and you can never rotate to a play, right? You have to walk the long way, all the way from your base back into mid. So you're never going to be able to be at a play early enough to utilize your poke, right? Your poke is never going to be used. Okay. Now, if we flip it and you go mid right away and you play poke, well, guess what? You're bleeding farm, and now you're getting weaker and weaker and weaker, and Ryze is getting stronger and stronger and stronger and stronger. So, what do you need to do to win games with Xerath? You need to have an obscenely strong first 15 minutes, which is why he's in counterpicked here, right? He's very specific. Is like if you have a good first 15 minutes and you could just siege mid as 4 at 15 minutes with your lead, and you just end the game through objectives, through mid push, great. Otherwise, you're fucked, right? In mid game. Absolutely fucked.
Yeah.
Even against Azir. I played Azir into Xerath, and I started the game 0-2 as Azir, and he still lost. Because once mid game rolled around, he was stuck under his turret against Azir, because he cannot do a single thing, right? Even in mid game. You just completely get pushed in, and you're just trapped.
Yep, correct. Unfortunately, not the best champs, but it's just kind of always been the trends with these champs, right? They're not terrible. Yep. If you like these champs and you want to master them, you could absolutely climb. Yeah. Nothing wrong with these champs. Yeah. There is something wrong with the next champion, though. And especially in regards to the question that we got. So, we got the question that Hwei in D tier is absolutely ridiculous. He's only D tier if you don't know how to build him. And the build suggested was BFT into Xerath. Now, AJ, what do you think of this? What's going through your mind when you hear this? Does he suddenly become S tier? What's happening with Hwei here?
I think we need to make a new tier if we build that. I think he's got to be F tier with that itemization. I'm not gonna lie to you.
Explain why is it the case? We're shitting on the question here, right? Yeah. We're kind of having a bit of fun, but just
I'm just messing around. But so for starters, let's talk about Hwei as a champion. Okay, so the thing is with Hwei is that he has a lot of utility in his kit, right? His WQ for the movement speed, his WW for the shields, right? So you have to remember that a champion is only allowed a certain amount of power, right? So the more power in his utility, the less power in his other spells. So I just want you to imagine a Blackfire Torch Hwei against a Blackfire Torch Victor in a team fight. The output difference is not even going to be remotely similar in a team fight. Victor's output in a fight is going to be like 50% more, I think, right? Because Victor has an easier time poking. His CC with his W is super reliable. His R is super reliable. Hwei is relying on 3 or 4 people stacking up together to get a lot of damage. And if they're not, good luck. You're not doing anything, right? So his raw output is weaker than a lot of other mages. His raw laning, after the QE nerfs, is much weaker compared to other mages as well. Right? So back in the day, I would pick Hwei into Ryze because you can match his wave clear. After the QE nerfs, absolutely not. Your wave clear is not even remotely the same as Ryze. So your output in lane is weaker, your output in team fights is weaker, and the trade-off is that you have more utility, right? You have way more utility than other mages, but that's not good for a mid, in my opinion, for a mid laner, for a mid lane control mage. I think it's just not worth the trade-off. And then I think, so what happens if we go segueing into the build is that you have to build in a way that gives you output, right? So you have to build full damage. You can't build defensive items on Hwei, in my opinion, to deal damage, right? You need to get your Horizon focus. You need to get your Rabadons, your Void Staff to deal damage, which means no good luck buying Zonias, no haste, right? Good luck buying Banshees. You're just not going to do anything. Even segueing to the Archangels, that's why this Archangels build is not going to work because it doesn't give you output. It gives you tank stats, right? But that's it. And it's some haste. That's it. No damage amp or anything. And so this is why Hwei's D tier is that relative to the other champions of his class, the output is not high enough. The trade-off, the utility trade-off is not worth it. His spells are too hard to land. Not enough wave clear after the nerfs.
Yep, just doesn't have enough power. He's just stats-wise, he's too weak, and especially with the wave clear. And BFT Xerath is only going to make that worse. Yes, you get like stats, you get a lot of mana, and the argument was made is that Hwei runs I've not seen many Hwei run because he's got the W, right? You invest a lot of money into the mana, but you have your W where you can get a lot of mana from. So one mana item is plenty. That's all you need. But you also run Mana Flow Band, by the way. So there's a lot of mana sources that you get, and investing more in that is not really going to help.
Yeah, and the only thing I would add is actually the players I've seen who had the most success with Hwei recently is they actually go electrocute. Now this is bot lane, not mid, but they go electrocute, and the reason why is that again gives you output, right? If you go cheap shot with your EE or your R and electrocute and scorch and absolutely and Mana Flow Band, you have some pretty okay output because remember just Q plus E plus passive to proc your electrocute, which is kind of cool. I haven't tried a mid. But I've seen some bot laners like Samikin. He's like 1600 LP when he plays Hwei bot. He goes electrocute, does amazing every time. He goes full damage. So you can force output on him, but like why not just play another mage, right?
Correct. Great. Final questions for today is the supportive mids. Why are we not including supportive mids on our tier list? And what is the state of supportive mids? We do see that Karma is getting a little bit of a nerf already, like completely good at Karma. Karma is just out, by the way. This champ is really bad right now. Mainly support-oriented nerfs, but let's just talk about supportive mids to begin with, okay? Supportive mids. The problem with these champions is, first of all, the mid game, okay? The mid game is very linear, because these champs, very similar as to the other champs that we were talking about, the Xerath and the Ziggs, very much struggle in the side lane, all right? They do not really have the ability to 1v1 power through the enemy laner. They're generally quite unique in the way that they clear the waves. If you look at Karma, for example, she could have the power to 1v1, but she can't clear the waves. Seraphine can clear the waves, but she doesn't have the power to 1v1. Very easy to flash spells. So these champs are very linear in the way they play. And if you are a silver player and you play Seraphine mid, you might find some success, actually. Because in the lower elos, these champions are quite good in team fights. They can shield, they can regenerate people. But it's just generally not consistent. And the real reason why we don't include them in the tier list is because they don't really teach the mid lane fundamentals well. They're not really truly mid laners. Like you said, supportive mid laners. There's support comes before mid lane. That says enough, right? They're just supports, and that's why we don't include them. What do you think about these supportive mids?
So I think you basically hit the nail on the head. I think the problem with these champions is that it's comp reliant, right? So the reason why they're not C tier is I think C tier is more lane dependent, I would say, is like what can you get a good lane? These champions are very, very like you need like a Yi or something. You need a Olaf, right? You need a Zid, right? You need a hyper ADC like a Jinx for these champions to function. So they're and you need an easy lane. So they're like niche squared, kinda. You need like it's niche upon niche. It's like very, very specific games that can be effective, right? But besides that, they don't really provide anything, right? I mean, Karma if you go full damage, but then you're not playing supportive style, right? And so, kind of covering what you said as well and expanding on it, you have to remember, guys, our tier list is not just pure strength. It's about how well does this champ what's kind of hidden is how well does this champion teach you mid lane as well, right? Like that's why we don't have we could have 100 champs on this list. We could keep Tryndamere and Besta, Zach, Garen on this list and have 100 champion list. Why do we not do that? Because they don't play how mid lane is designed to be played, right? So you're not learning mid lane, you're learning your champion, right? And so for a mid lane tier list, I don't think that makes sense. So that's the reason why specifically we don't have these champions on the tier list as well. But if they were to be on the list, they'd be in between C and D tier, in my opinion. It would be like this weird gray area where they're shit and they're really niche, but like extremely niche in the right situation, they can maybe be effective.
Yep. Probably just D tier. That's just realistic.
Realistically,
D tier. Yep.
Yeah.
Okay, great. Now, the final thing is, are there any changes made to the lower elo T list, right? We talked about Cassiopeia getting a small little buff and Veigar getting a small little nerf. Is this especially going to affect Veigar? Because I don't think Cassiopeia is a champ that you want to look into.
Yeah.
Don't look into Cassio, guys. How about this Veigar champion? In lower elos, does this extra bit of cooldown increase on the R matter? I don't think so. The reason why I don't think that it is because, especially for lower ranked Veigar players, we actually recommend stacking haste a lot. Because it's more forgiving, and it's going to give you more E-up time, but a lot of people don't understand. It gives you more wave clear, more stacks. Yeah. In general, stacking haste is good. You don't really want to be experimenting with all kind of crazy stars, all builds and stuff like that. Yeah. You don't need all of it in lower ranks, okay? Yeah. You just get yourself haste, you get yourself AP, you get yourself a little bit of damage, a little bit of defensive stats, and your champ will eventually just shine. Okay. So I think Veigar is still just insane. He still teaches the game. I don't think this changed anything. Low elo tier list in general, it's not that moving. It's quite a...
Yeah, it's going to be stagnant because the lower elo you are, this is just the reality, the less of an impact that any champion change is going to be. You're going to feel the change less because you're either not making a mistake, the enemy's not punishing the mistake you make with the change enough, and or you're not utilizing the change enough, right? Yep. So that's kind of what I would say with that. Now, the only thing I would say with Veigar, just to play devil's advocate, is that what I see a lot with lower elo Veigar players, especially newer Veigar players, is they over skirmish early game. Because you have to remember with the lower elo mindset is that they feel scared when their team is fighting, right? So I want you to put yourself in the shoes of a new Veigar player, right? Not someone who has experience, a new Veigar player. And they're like, oh, fuck, my team's fighting. I have to be at this fight, right? And then they are. And the first fight is great. You get your first fight down. Maybe it's okay, right? Then what happens if another fight breaks out in 100 seconds from now and you are still on cooldown? But then you feel scared that your team's fighting. You go into that fight and you actually die because you don't have R. So that's the only situation where I'd be like, I feel a little nervous for newer Veigar players. I don't think this changes the needle at all because he teaches the game super well. But I would say that's something definitely to think about. And I think this will actually hit his win rate a decent chunk in
you think?
Low elo. I actually think so because of that scenario. Because low elo players feel very incentivized to fight early game, even if their champion's not a fighter, because they're scared of their team dying. That's just a fact, right?
It's true.
That's what yeah.
It's true. Okay. Yeah, that's a good point, actually. That's a really good point. Yeah. You would still think he's S+, right?
I still think he's S+, but it changes. Like, if there is another champ that gets changed to be a little more beginner friendly, then I would like swap them around. But I think there needs to be some S+ champ. Like, I think Veigar's still a great champ for learning the game, but his effectiveness definitely goes down for lower elo with this, to be honest.
So what we're going to do is we're going to actually double check the lower elo win rate. We're going to stake silver.
Let's compare. Yeah.
Silver. We're going to write that down, 52.28. I'm going to write that down right here. 52.28 Veigar win rate. And we're going to double check in the next patch and see what it actually changes up on mid lane. So stay tuned for that one. Once again, guys, if you have any questions regarding this Patchcast or any champions in the low or high elo tier list, let us down know in the comments or join the Discord where we have a dedicated Patchcast channel where you can just put your questions and we will then get back to them.
Ask away, guys.
Ask away. We love answering questions. Thank you all for joining. Thank you all for your time. And we'll see you in 2 weeks with a new video. Peace out, guys. Bye-bye. So me and AJ actually forgot to touch on Lissandra. So I want to make a little bit of an extra add-on talking about her because she didn't really get changes in this specific patch, but rather in the previous patch where they reduced her cooldown on Q by 1 second, and they also nerfed her armor growth a little bit. Now, we thought that would put her from C into A tier. A tier was in this case a pretty moderate guess, but what it looks like in hindsight is that Lissandra was actually a lot better than what we gave her credit for. So Lissandra actually is incredibly good, and we would reckon she's all the way up until high S tier, even in the S+ tier. As you can see, the biggest tell sign is, of course, the win rate that Lissandra got. She got quite a bit of win rate since the initial patch. Her win rate is generally a lot higher. But not only that, also her pick rates are higher. So it's not only the Lissandra players that are playing her, it's also other people playing her. And that means that she is just generally a lot better. The biggest tell sign is that when pros start playing Lissandra, you can see it right here, that a lot of pros have been picking her up. That's when you truly know that this champion is pretty legit. So, yeah, we argued somewhere high S, bottom S+ tier is where we would put Lissandra. to finalize this tier list. And that means that in 2 weeks' time, not only are we going to answer a lot of you guys' questions, we're also going to revamp the S plus and the S tier completely, just to make sure that there's clear hierarchies in regards to what are the actual best champs of the game and which ones are not. And currently, definitely, Ryze is the strongest mid lane on the patch. So if there's one champ that you want to pick up, he's your guy.